Elijah Martinez is 17 years old when he decides to cut the mark from his hand. 17 years of carrying a crescent moon on his right palm that appeared the day he was born, and which has defined every moment of his existence since. The mark is pale silver, perfect in its symmetry, approximately 1 inch long with the points facing upward toward his fingers. It doesn't hurt, doesn't impair function, simply exists as permanent reminder that Elijah is different, marked, supposedly chosen by God for purposes that adults have been speculating about since his birth, but which remain frustratingly unclear despite 17 years of prophecy, prayer, and religious attention. If you're watching this video, drop a comment and let us know what city you're watching from. Elijah lives in Covenant Springs, Texas, a town of 4,000 people, where faith is woven into every aspect of daily life, where church attendance is expected and religious devotion is the primary lens through which people interpret the world. His parents, Rebecca and Samuel Martinez, are devout Pentecostals who've raised Elijah in the church, who've always believed their son was marked for divine purpose, who've encouraged, sometimes demanded, that he embrace his special status rather than resent it. From earliest childhood, Elijah has been treated differently. Church members spoke about him in hushed, reverent tones. Pastors prayed over him constantly, asking God to reveal the boy's purpose. Teachers at the Christian school he attended gave him special attention, simultaneously protecting and scrutinizing him as though his marked status made him both precious and dangerous. Other children kept distance, unsure how to relate to someone adults constantly referred to as chosen and special. Elijah tried to live up to expectations. He studied scripture intensively, prayed for hours daily, participated in every church activity with enthusiasm born from genuine desire to understand why God marked him and what he was supposed to do with that marking. But clarity never came. The mark remained, unchanged and unexplained. While Elijah grew from marked infant to marked child to marked teenager, without ever receiving divine communication that explained his purpose or confirmed that he was actually chosen for anything at all. The burden became unbearable around age 15 when Elijah started questioning everything he'd been taught. He looked at the mark with growing resentment rather than pride, seeing it as prison rather than blessing, as something that trapped him in a role he never chose and couldn't escape. Adults projected their religious fantasies onto him, made him symbol of their faith rather than treating him as actual person with doubts and fears and desires that had nothing to do with being divinely chosen. He started pushing back against expectations, skipping church services, arguing with his parents about whether the mark actually meant anything or if everyone had simply decided to interpret random biological quirk as divine intervention. These rebellions brought punishment and increased religious pressure. More prayer sessions, more meetings with pastors, more demands that Elijah submit to God's will and accept his marked status with gratitude rather than resistance. By 17, Elijah feels suffocated. Every aspect of his life is controlled by the mark and the expectations it generates. He can't date normally because girls either fetishize his marked status or avoid him as too weird. He can't make genuine friendships because people relate to him as chosen vessel rather than regular teenager. He can't plan a future because everyone assumes his purpose will be revealed by God rather than chosen through normal processes of education and career development. The final straw comes when Elijah is accepted to secular university in Austin, a scholarship opportunity that would allow him to leave Covenant Springs and experience life outside the religious bubble that suffocated him. His parents refuse to let him go, arguing that Elijah needs to stay in the church community where his gift can be nurtured and protected, that secular education will corrupt him and cause him to reject his divine calling. The argument becomes explosive, ending with Samuel declaring that Elijah will obey his parents and God's plan, or he'll be cast out of the family entirely. That night, alone in his room and desperate to escape the trap his life has become, Elijah makes the decision that will change everything. If the mark is what chains him to expectations and limitations he never chose, then removing the mark will free him. It's crude logic born from teenage desperation, but Elijah is beyond caring about consequences or divine displeasure. He wants to be normal, to be free, to be anything other than the marked boy that Covenant Springs has made him into. He uses a utility knife from his father's toolbox, the blade sharp and clean. Elijah doesn't hesitate or build up courage. He simply presses the blade to his palm where the crescent mark sits and cuts. The pain is immediate and intense, worse than he expected. But he forces himself to continue, cutting around the mark's edges, attempting to excise it completely from his hand. Blood flows freely, soaking through the towel he'd prepared, the physical pain somehow satisfying because it's real and immediate rather than the vague spiritual burden he's carried for 17 years. The cutting takes 10 minutes that feel eternal. When Elijah finally stops, when he's removed the marked skin completely and thrown it in the trash wrapped in bloody towels, his hand is destroyed. A raw, bleeding wound that will definitely scar, that might impair function permanently, but which is finally free of the crescent moon that's defined and limited his entire existence. Elijah bandages the wound carefully, hiding the full extent of what he's done, planning to claim it was accident if his parents discover the injury before it heals enough to hide. He takes pain medication and lies in bed feeling simultaneously liberated and terrified of what he's done, of how God might respond to someone mutilating the mark he supposedly placed, of whether he's just committed unforgivable sin or taken first step toward actual freedom. He falls asleep around midnight, exhausted from pain and emotional turmoil, expecting to wake to consequences, but hoping desperately that removing the mark will release him from the choking expectations that have made his life unbearable. What Elijah doesn't expect, what he couldn't possibly anticipate, is waking at 3 a.m. to discover that cutting the mark from his hand was not escape but invitation to something far more binding and terrible than what he was trying to flee. The pain in his chest wakes him. Burning, searing agony centered over his heart that makes the hand wound feel trivial by comparison. Elijah tears off his shirt expecting to find injury, expecting his wound to have become infected, expecting some medical explanation for the fire consuming his chest. Instead, he finds a second crescent moon, this one larger and brighter than the original, glowing with pale silver light that illuminates his darkened bedroom, positioned directly over his heart in location impossible to hide or ignore. Elijah staggers to the bathroom mirror, hoping the glow is hallucination from pain medication or blood loss. But the mark is real and visible, approximately 3 inches long. Perfect crescent moon that seems to pulse with its own light, burning into his chest in ways that go beyond physical pain, into something spiritual and terrifying. He tries to touch it, to verify its reality, but his fingers won't make contact. The mark exists on his chest, but also somehow beyond it. Visible and tangible, but not quite physical in conventional sense. The burning intensifies suddenly, becoming unbearable for several seconds before subsiding to constant, uncomfortable heat. Elijah realizes with growing horror that the intensification corresponded with his thought that maybe this was hallucination, that maybe he was imagining the whole thing. The mark responded to dishonesty. Not spoken dishonesty, but internal dishonesty. His attempt to deny what he was seeing and experiencing. Elijah tests this theory carefully. He thinks deliberately false thoughts. The sky is green. I'm not afraid. This mark isn't real. And each time the burning intensifies immediately, the mark apparently punishing internal dishonesty with pain that enforces truth. When Elijah thinks honest thoughts, I'm terrified. I don't understand what's happening. I wish I'd never cut my hand. The burning subsides to baseline discomfort, still present but tolerable. He looks at his bandaged hand, unwrapping it slowly to examine the wound he inflicted hours earlier. The injury should be raw and bleeding, should take weeks to heal properly, should leave permanent scarring from the crude surgery he performed. Instead, the wound is already closing, new skin forming impossibly fast. The healing accelerated beyond any natural process. Within minutes of Elijah watching, the wound is closed completely, leaving only pale silver scar tissue in the exact shape of the crescent moon he cut away. the mark has returned to his hand, and a second, more powerful mark has appeared on his chest. God has responded to Elijah's attempt at freedom, not with punishment or forgiveness, but with doubling down, with marking him more permanently and visibly, with giving him a gift or curse that enforces truth through pain and which can't be removed through any physical means Elijah has access to. Elijah sits on his bathroom floor, shirt off, staring at the glowing mark on his chest and the renewed mark on his hand, understanding with terrible clarity that he's not escaping anything, that his attempt to cut away divine marking has resulted in being marked more thoroughly, that whatever God intends for him will not be denied or avoided, regardless of Elijah's desires or consent. The burning in his chest continues, constant reminder that he's sealed twice now, that his mission, whatever it is, will require him to confront dishonesty and deception in ways that will destroy relationships and shatter the comfortable lies people use to maintain social peace. Elijah doesn't want this power, didn't ask to be truth enforcer, desperately wishes he could go back to just having the hand mark that he could hide from others. But it's too late for regret or retreat. He's been chosen, marked, sealed twice over, and the burning in his chest makes clear that pretending otherwise, lying to himself or others about what he is and what he can do, will bring pain that enforces honesty regardless of consequences or comfort. Elijah spends the rest of the night sitting on his bathroom floor, experimenting with the chest mark's responses, discovering the rules that govern this new burden he accidentally summoned through his attempt at freedom. The mark burns when people near him lie, not just to him specifically, but any dishonesty spoken or thought within approximately 20 feet of his location. The intensity of the burning correlates with the severity of the lie, with deliberate malicious deception causing pain far worse than polite social falsehoods. By dawn, Elijah has learned to distinguish between different types of dishonesty through the mark's burning responses. White lies that smooth social interactions cause mild warmth. Serious deceptions that harm others cause searing pain. And blasphemy, speaking God's name falsely, claiming divine authority without genuine belief, using faith as manipulation, triggers burning so intense that Elijah collapses, unable to function until the blasphemer stops speaking or moves away. His parents discover him at 6 a.m., still shirtless, the glowing crescent moon on his chest immediately visible. Rebecca screams and drops the laundry basket she's carrying. Samuel freezes in the doorway, his face cycling through shock, fear, and something approaching vindication. His son tried to reject God's marking and has been answered with something far more dramatic than the original sign. Samuel approaches cautiously, studying the chest mark that pulses with pale light, comparing it to the renewed mark on Elijah's palm that shows no trace of last night's brutal cutting. He asks what happened, demands explanation for this second marking, his voice carrying both religious awe and parental anger at Elijah's clear attempt to mutilate the original gift. Elijah tries to explain about cutting the mark, about wanting freedom from expectations, about waking to find this burning seal that responds to dishonesty. But as he speaks, the chest mark flares with pain. Because he's not being completely honest. He's explaining what happened without admitting his genuine rage at God for forcing this role on him, without expressing the depth of his resentment and fear about what this second marking means for any chance of normal life. Samuel interprets the burning as divine judgment on Elijah's attempted rebellion. He launches into sermon about accepting God's will, about the sin of rejecting chosen status, about how Elijah should be grateful rather than resentful about being marked for special purpose. Every word causes the chest mark to burn more intensely, because Samuel's sermon is full of dishonesty. His father doesn't actually believe half of what he's preaching, is using religious language to control his son rather than expressing genuine spiritual conviction. Elijah screams for his father to stop, the burning becoming unbearable as Samuel's false piety continues. Rebecca tries to intervene, asking Samuel to give Elijah space, suggesting they call Pastor Williams to help interpret what's happening. But her words trigger burning too. She's not genuinely concerned about Elijah's well-being. She's worried about what church members will think, about how this new marking will affect their family's social standing in Covenant Springs. The pain forces Elijah to speak truth he's never voiced. "You don't care about me or what God wants. You care about looking righteous in front of the church. Everything you're saying is lies wrapped in Bible verses, and Dad, you don't even believe most of it. You're just performing faith because that's what keeps you respected here." The honesty provides relief, the burning subsiding as Elijah speaks truth that the mark apparently rewards. But his words devastate his parents, exposing dynamics they've hidden behind religious language for years. Samuel's face reddens with rage and shame at being called out so directly. Rebecca begins crying, not because Elijah's words are false, but because they're accurate enough to hurt. Pastor Williams arrives within the hour, summoned by Rebecca's frantic call. He's led Covenant Springs Community Church for 22 years, presided over Elijah's dedication as infant, has been central figure in interpreting the boy's mark and purpose throughout his life. The pastor enters Elijah's room with authority born from decades of spiritual leadership, prepared to counsel the troubled teenager and explain God's will regarding these new developments. But the moment Pastor Williams begins speaking, offering comfort, explaining that God's ways are mysterious, suggesting that Elijah's second marking is blessing rather than curse. The chest mark erupts with burning so intense that Elijah collapses, screaming for the pastor to stop talking, begging him to leave. Because Pastor Williams' words are hollow performance, religious platitudes spoken without genuine conviction, manipulation disguised as spiritual guidance. The pastor is offended and confused, demanding to know why Elijah is rejecting his counsel. Samuel tries to explain about the chest mark responding to dishonesty, about how Elijah can apparently detect lies through physical pain. Pastor Williams dismisses this as teenage dramatics, continues his sermon about submission to God's will, his voice carrying practiced authority that's worked on congregants for decades. Elijah forces himself to speak through the burning agony. "You don't believe what you're preaching. You're not sure God is even real. You're terrified it's all performance you've committed to for so long that you can't admit the truth even to yourself. Everything you're saying about God's will and mysterious ways is just words you use to control people when you can't actually answer their questions." The accusation hangs in shocked silence. Pastor Williams' face goes pale, then red, cycling through emotions as Elijah's words hit truths the pastor has buried under decades of religious performance. He tries to deny it, to claim absolute faith and certainty. But the chest marks burning tells Elijah that every word of denial is false, that the pastor is exactly as uncertain and afraid as Elijah accused him of being. Pastor Williams leaves abruptly, unable to maintain his authority in the face of someone who can detect his doubts and deceptions. Samuel and Rebecca are left staring at their son, recognizing that whatever this second marking has done, it's made Elijah impossibly dangerous to the comfortable lies that maintain their faith community. If Elijah can detect dishonesty and is apparently compelled to speak truth by pain that enforces honesty, then he'll destroy every relationship and institution built on the polite fictions that make social peace possible. Over the following days, Elijah discovers the full extent of his new burden. He can't attend church because the building is filled with people whose faith is performance or uncertainty disguised as conviction. And the accumulated dishonesty causes burning so intense he can't remain conscious. He can't attend school because teenagers lie constantly about everything. And even being in classroom triggers pain that makes learning impossible. He can't interact with his parents without the mark responding to their every false reassurance, every manipulative, "I'm doing this because I love you," every claim that they want what's best for him when they actually want him to conform to their expectations. Elijah becomes isolated, spending most of his time alone in his room, where the only dishonesty he encounters is his own internal conflicts. He learns that his own self-deception triggers burning too. He can't lie to himself about his feelings, can't pretend things are okay when they're not, can't use the psychological defense mechanisms that normal people employ to manage difficult emotions and circumstances. The only person who doesn't trigger the chest mark is his younger sister Maya, 14 years old and apparently incapable of significant deception. She enters his room cautiously one evening, asking if he's okay, expressing genuine concern without ulterior motives or hidden agendas. The Mark remains quiet during their conversation, allowing Elijah to experience human connection without pain. For the first time since the marking appeared, Maya asks what happened, why he cut his hand, what the chest mark means. Elijah tells her everything honestly, about feeling trapped by expectations, about desperate attempt to escape through self-mutilation, about waking to find himself sealed twice over with ability that makes normal life impossible. Maya listens without judgment, asks questions that show genuine interest rather than religious interpretation of events. She tells Elijah something he desperately needs to hear. Maybe it's not punishment. Maybe it's protection. Maybe God gave you this so people can't lie to you anymore. So you don't have to wonder who's real and who's performing. Everyone else has to. Guess if people are being honest. You know for certain, that's not just burden, it's gift too. The perspective shift is profound. Elijah has been experiencing the mark purely as curse, as thing that makes life unbearable and destroys relationships. But Maya's reframing suggests it might also be liberation from the uncertainty and manipulation that makes human relationships so difficult and painful. Gift that ensures Elijah will never be deceived or controlled through lies. The chest mark's burning becomes Elijah's constant companion over the following weeks, teaching him truths about Covenant Springs he never wanted to know. The town that seemed unified in faith is revealed as community built on carefully maintained deceptions. People performing devotion while harboring doubts, leaders wielding authority they don't genuinely believe in. Families held together by polite lies that prevent honest confrontation. Elijah's presence becomes destabilizing force. When he attends Sunday service, the chest mark responds to accumulated dishonesty with burning so intense that he faints during worship. Pastor Williams tries to frame it as spiritual warfare. But the mark burns viciously in response to this false interpretation, forcing Elijah to speak truth. It's not demons, it's you. All of you performing faith you're not sure you have. The accusation silences the church. Some members leave immediately. Others demand he be removed. But a small group remains, people whose faith is genuine enough that Elijah's presence doesn't trigger burning, who approach him asking what he experiences and what it means. Among this group is Thomas Reed, the youth pastor who struggled privately with doubts he's never voiced. Thomas sits with Elijah in the empty church, asking direct questions. When Thomas admits his uncertainties, his questions about Scripture, his struggles with prayer, feeling like talking to himself, the chest mark remains quiet, confirming Thomas's honesty. Thomas tells Elijah something crucial. Maybe your purpose isn't to confirm everyone's faith. Maybe it's to expose the lies so real faith can be distinguished from performance. You can't enable dishonesty. The mark won't let you. That's terrifying, but also necessary. The conversation plants understanding about what Elijah's mission might actually be. Not to perform miracles or deliver prophecies, but simply to exist as living detector of dishonesty, forcing people to confront whether their expressed beliefs match their internal reality. But this mission carries devastating costs. Elijah's best friend Jason visits, expressing concern and offering support. Every word triggers burning. Jason's concern is performance, his friendship maintained from habit. Elijah is forced to speak truth. You don't believe me. You think I'm insane. You're here because you feel obligated. Stop pretending. Jason leaves angry and humiliated, their friendship destroyed by truths that should have remained unspoken. Elijah's girlfriend Emma breaks up with him after the mark forces him to tell her that he knows she's dating him partly for status, that her expressions of love are performance mixed with genuine affection, but not pure devotion. Within a month, Elijah has lost his friend group, his girlfriend, his place in church community. His parents barely speak to him, except to express disappointment. Samuel suggests Elijah should leave Covenant Springs, that his presence is destroying the community's peace. But Maya argues that Elijah leaving would be running away from his purpose. The community built on lies isn't real community. That exposing dishonesty is necessary, even if the process is painful. The turning point comes when the church's financial administrator, Gerald Harris, is caught embezzling. Gerald confesses immediately when Elijah is present at the elder board meeting, explaining that he couldn't maintain his denials with Elijah in the room, that the boy's presence made lying unbearable. Pastor Williams resigns a week later, unable to continue leading while harboring doubts that Elijah's presence makes him impossible to hide. His resignation letter is honest about his struggles with faith, about years of performing certainty while privately questioning everything. The honesty is shocking, but opens space for more authentic leadership. Thomas Reed is appointed interim pastor. His first sermon addresses Elijah directly, thanks him for being unwilling witness to truth, suggests that God's purpose for the boy might be exactly what's happening, forcing community to confront whether their faith is real or performed. Elijah sits in the congregation, understanding finally what his mission is. Not to be prophet or miracle worker, but simply to exist as catalyst for truth, person whose presence makes dishonesty unbearable. The mission will destroy what he loves, will isolate him from everyone except rare people capable of genuine honesty. But it's also necessary. Communities that maintain peace through lies eventually collapse. Elijah's presence forces reckoning before collapse. 2 years after the second marking appeared, Elijah stands in front of Covenant Springs Community Church, preparing to leave town permanently. He's 19 now, legally able to make his own decisions, heading to Austin for university his parents once forbade. The chest mark glows faintly under his shirt, constant reminder of what he can never escape being. The church has transformed dramatically. Attendance dropped 40%. People who couldn't maintain religious performances left. But those who remained built something more authentic, where doubt is acknowledged rather than hidden, where Thomas Reed's leadership emphasizes honest struggle over performed certainty. Elijah's parents stand awkwardly near their car, unable to approach their son without triggering the mark's response to whatever false sentiments they're preparing. Maya hugs her brother tightly, the only family member whose embrace doesn't come with burning pain. She tells him Covenant Springs needed what he forced them to become, that the honesty was necessary, even though it hurt. Thomas approaches with envelope containing letters from congregation members. People thanking Elijah for exposing Gerald's embezzlement. Former Pastor Williams expressing gratitude for forcing confession of doubts. The letters prove Elijah's mission, despite its brutality, produced positive outcomes. But they don't erase the cost. Elijah has lost his childhood home, his parents' acceptance, every friendship except Maya, his place in community. The chest mark has made normal human connection nearly impossible. Relationships fail when people can't maintain polite fictions that smooth conflicts. As Elijah prepares to leave, Detective Sarah Chen from Austin Police arrives, someone Thomas contacted months ago. She's investigating corruption in city government, where officials lie about bribery and witnesses give false testimony. She asks if Elijah would be willing to be present during interviews, to indicate when people are being honest versus lying. Elijah agrees, understanding this might be practical expression of his mission, using the mark to expose corruption that harms communities, becoming instrument of truth not just in religious contexts, but in secular systems that rely on lies to maintain power. The drive to Austin takes 3 hours. Elijah moves into an apartment he'll share with 2 roommates who don't know about the marks. He plans to hide the chest mark to present as normal student, but his roommates trigger burning immediately. One lies about being fine sharing the apartment, the other performs friendship while privately judging Elijah. Maya sees his distress, asks if he regrets cutting the original mark. Elijah's answer is honest. Yes and no. I regret the pain, the isolation, losing everything. But I don't regret knowing truth. Most people never know if they're being lied to, if their relationships are real. I know. That's both curse and gift. Work with Detective Chen begins a Later, Elijah sits in interview room while city councilman denies taking bribes, the chest mark burning with intensity that confirms guilt. His physical response guides Chen's questioning. The councilman eventually confesses, overwhelmed by targeted questioning, unable to maintain lies. Chen tells Elijah his help was crucial. Over his first semester, Elijah finds rhythm that's not happiness, but is sustainable. He attends classes, works with Detective Chen on cases, maintains relationships with Maya and Thomas. He has no romantic relationships, few friendships. The chest mark continues burning in response to constant human dishonesty. He meets other marked individuals online, people with unexplained signs and burdens who understand what it means to be chosen for purposes they didn't consent to. They form informal support network, people sealed for missions they're still trying to understand. The video ends with Elijah speaking directly to camera, both marks visible. I tried to cut away what God put on me. Instead, I was sealed twice over, given ability that makes normal life impossible but ensures I'll never be deceived. I've lost almost everything, but I've gained certainty. I know when people are honest, when authority is genuine, truth in ways most people guess about. The second marking wasn't forgiveness. It was God making clear I don't get to choose whether I serve. But it wasn't punishment either. It was sealing, equipment for mission I'm still learning. My purpose is exposing truth even when it destroys what I love. That's brutal and isolating. But it's necessary. If you're marked, if you carry burden you didn't ask for, you're not being punished. You're being equipped for something that requires exactly what you are. The cost is real. The isolation is crushing. But you're not alone. And the marking means something even when God doesn't explain what. The final image shows both marks glowing in darkened room. Physical manifestation of mission that makes normal life impossible, but which makes him instrument of truth in a world that desperately needs what he represents. The chosen one tried to remove the mark, and God responded with escalation, with second marking that made his purpose inescapable. The cost is everything. The gift is knowing. And the mission continues whether he consents or not.